All right, good morning, everybody. Or noon time, I guess, 12:04, February 1st, on a nor'easter day up here in Newport. So we'll get this done here before we have to lash on the snow chains and head back north. But what a wild, quick weekend. Kind of gutting. I will say before we show any video of yeah, boy, how bad you feel for Terry and those guys. And we know that Terry does wear his heart on his sleeve and can get choked up at times. And I thought he was pretty well composed given how it all just kind of unraveled so quickly in that race with the electronics. It was only a matter of time, I suppose. But anyway, who has any thoughts on this before we go to, I think, one little clip?
Let's go to the clip.
All right, let's do it. Now that, let's see here. Got it. So one of the things, share sound. Thank you for the tip there, Peter. All right, let's see. Okay. You guys to see this okay?
Yep.
All right. So this was actually, I thought what was really interesting of the perfection in the timing with Luna Rossa. You guys probably saw the same too, that apparently the race management issues that they've been having were non-existent as far as we know, but they certainly control them. But let's just roll it here and tell me when to stop.
Yep. Nice at one. Yep.
Speed here, board's coming up. Yeah. He's got below. Yep. Okay, stand by, trimming up. Yeah. Let's try and take off here, boys. Yeah. Full speed here. Yeah. Is it going to be one push, probably? Marcus in the moment because he's early kicker.
Yes. That's his shot, obviously.
Yeah. Stand by for a press here. 2, 1, pressing. You're ready to come up again, kicker? Yeah. Yeah. 2, 1. Up now.
Right. He's off. You in the line?
Yep. Step veering away. Easy. Full charge here.
Full charge.
Yeah.
Priority.
Release. Yeah. Okay, good. Let's lower this. Speed here.
Okay, play for the boundary. Put pressure in front. The side of. Copy. Get up. Pressure coming in front. Nice. Finish it up. Okay, 3, 2, 1, more down, and 30. My left, my drop. Crossing. A little bit. Not too early. Here we go. Coming up. Yeah.
Go here, right, mate, when you can, boys.
Yeah. My hand is good here. My hand is good here. Yeah, this is good. This is working fine. Yeah. You will have to go, and we will do a split build and go. Copy. Building here. Yeah. Up a little bit, okay. Face forward. Stand by, guys. 3, 2, 1, ball down. Perfect.
On draft.
Building.
Pretty much match racing 101, isn't it? I mean, if you get an even start, it's hard to live on somebody's hip when it's close, and that was the case for American Magic, and it was the case for Luna Rossa as well. And but the starboard advantage, he was able to extend just a speed build away, and then he steps up, and then he's got the breathing room and control. It's no different than the Catalina 37s.
I sure like the way how calm Spithill is there. One word sentences, everything's cool, communicates precisely what he's going to do, down for speed, let's go into a point mode, when to attack. I mean, it just clicking beautifully there.
Ed, you really sort of dove into this pre-start sort of playbook early on, back before all this started. Do you see, is it playing out as kind of what everyone thought it would, or is it kind of the pre-start game a little bit different?
Well, I think I'm excited in one hand to see that the stuff that I proposed in my article seemed to be kind of what is playing out, and there's not anything dramatically different, and so that's fun. At least I didn't miss something that I was not expecting, but certainly I thought the boats would be a little bit closer together and not just one move by whoever is the boat that gets to the boundary first, and then the other boat, decides to go past them or not. So it's a little, I guess it's a little bit farther apart than I expected. And especially after watching the Christmas Cup, looked like things were going to get pretty animated. But they're going at pretty high speeds and just making sure that things are clean and clear. And I think playing to the strengths, the strongest boat puts himself in a place that, they can gain from there and not be compromised. And that's what Luna Rossa was doing here, was just going and putting themselves in a place where they could sail their race. And if American Magic turned out to be faster than them, then okay, they got a problem. But knowing that American Magic had so much to do to sail around the race course, just to get around the race course well, I think Luna Rossa did a smart thing and just, get out there and get clean and start letting it rip.
What do you think, Jonathan?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Luna Rossa has raised their game substantially over the last couple of weeks. I heard a quote from Bruni saying that they were going 10% faster around the course now compared with 2 weeks ago, which means that actually maybe American Magic wasn't that slow. It's just like the game is progressively getting faster. That's what it looked like to me. And how smooth Luna Rossa was in their maneuvers. They really do seem to be figuring out the mechanics of sailing the boat as well.
Yeah, and as Gary mentioned, that there was some pretty short, sharp information flow between them, that clearly they have been spending time off the water, developing that, that speaking rhythm. Because there's a lot of things to talk about. But I mean, for instance, as they pushed one time on, in the pre-start at about 35 seconds to go, they gave a push to American Magic. And once American Magic committed to being down, then they turned back up. As Pete said, that's pretty classic for how you develop your setup in the match race, to kill a little bit of time. But then that Bruni has the information of how far it is to the line and how much they have to kill. And his comment to Spithill was, just you and the line. And he said it really quick. And it has to be something that they've talked about and gone through together to know what to expect, but he said, just you and the line. And that was all he said. And Spithill knows that he's just looking. He has a piece of software in front of him, a visual that shows him that basically the perfect boat at the perfect speed is catching up to them from behind. And then when that boat catches them, if you're not at full speed, you're going to be late. And it's kind of a funny thing, but it works really well to give you an idea of how much time you got to kill. Shows it in visual format. And, so it's just you and the line. Now the driver knows, he just watches that thing catch up to him. And when it's there, he's got to be at full speed and he's on time.
There was a shot during that sequence when the boats were both on port tack. It was a rare shot from the water angle and behind. You know, I'd like to see water down low more often because you get to see the chop and stuff, which we don't see from the aerial. But the shot with the two boats going away on port, it was dramatic how much higher Luna Rosa was pointing than American Magic. I mean, it was like a 4 degree, which is quite a lot, sailing higher. And that really was the difference. And we could see the VMG number favored Luna Rosa more often than it did American Magic. And I think the pointing was a big differential here.
You know, you talk about the communication. That's something that, you know, we all can learn in our own racing is, you know, here we have ACTV recording everything and we get to replay it. And here we're commenting on how good it sounds and listen to the code words and stuff. But that same type of learning can be done on any boat anywhere. And the ability to go to just put your phone in your pocket and put on the recorder and record the race and go back and listen to the pre-start. It's petrifying to watch it. I've done it a bunch of times, and you learn so much about how you communicate. And if you're an America's Cup team or a series team, maybe you get together, which is really hard, and talk about how you could have, as a team, done better and what were you thinking there.
It seems like, especially in a lot of those sort of the pre-race comps and generally, as I guess, as throughout every race that we've seen so far, that the right side of the race course, no matter where they put it, seems to be strong, but it seems to be very difficult to get there for American Magic on these two races. Is it? You guys have a similar takeaway?
Jonathan?
Well, I mean, it was clear that American Magic towards the end was a little bit intimidated in the pre-starts, and rightfully so. You know, they didn't have their boat as worked out. They just weren't able to do some of the things that Luna Rosa could do. So I think they would have been happy to come up with even starts, but I'll leave it to you guys. That's what it looked like to me. They just knew they had an inferior tool, and it's how do you have confidence in that situation?
Yeah, I think it's hard to actually know what they had. They didn't have any time against anybody, and so they're just going out there, you know, putting your best foot forward. But I think, you know, having sailed in that part of the world right there a lot, it's not that easy before the start. And these guys have to, sitting at the chase boat, if you were able to watch the whole pre-start routine, they go around the course a few times and then they're sitting next to their chase boats talking about what's going to happen, making sure that everything's ready to go on the boat. They're basically tied up to the chase boat at about, I don't know, from 10 minutes down to about 4 minutes, and then they let them go and off they run. So that's the time where they're talking to the coach, they're making their strategy plan for off the line. And, you know, in that little race course area, it's so shifty and so puffy, and there's different current from one side to the other. There's different current from top to bottom. There's, you know, a lot of boats blocking wind on each side of the course. So it's not that simple to just say, we definitely want to start here. So what happens is you've got a lot of things happening on the fly that when you see a guy who's a little bit early, do you take advantage and put yourself in another position that's a little stronger? You see somebody that's a little bit late, which American Magic was late a couple of those starts, you know, and that just writes the script for America or for Luna Rosa. You just start straight ahead of them on the same tack and match what they do. That's pretty straightforward. So, you know, it's not all about which side of the race course is necessarily better as it is how do you just control the action from the point that the start happens and onward.
Yeah, I think you go back also, yes, rewind some of the starts, and I still, you know, there was much to do about the sort of the dual helmsman of Luna Rosa, and there's definitely times where there's a lot of crossing and delays where Dean is pretty late to get to the wheel, you know, where he needs to be, and you just like, man, at some point in time, every time I watch him cross the boat, you know, he's big and it takes him, you know, he's awkward getting across, and it's got to be tough to get right back on the wheel and have a full sense of where you are in the whole thing. And it's tough to watch.
Yeah, well, he kind of looked hunched over while he was steering, and I don't know why the helm was jumping around so much, but the wheel sure was kind of jerking all the time. And what that was about, they never said, but it didn't look very smooth to me. And then the lured mark roundings, you know, Peter will laugh, but you know, Billy Kidd, I'm a fan of him, you know, how he skis, you know, wide and end up close when you go by the gate. And Spithill, you know, he really does a nice job around the gate. And American Magic, you know, they just kind of end up wide and sliding off to leeward. So they never really got the leeward gates down. And clearly they had trouble at the windward gate with the capsize. You know, why to go through the tack and a bear off and a big puff? Why not just bear off? But I don't know, the boat handling was an issue too, in addition to starts and pointing.
Well, we have to all remember how early everybody is in the development of a class like this. And that's something that it always takes time. I mean, I remember back when lasers were new and nobody could figure out how to jibe in 25 knots of wind. So they would tack around at the downwind, you know, and, you know, now it's like second nature. You got to figure this stuff out, and it takes time, and it takes racing to really put you under pressure to get it right.
I remember the O'Days in the Berkeley Circle and the lasers, brand new boats, 1972. And I got really upset when I capsized at the jibe mark, and I got up on the bottom of my boat to ride it and looked around, and all 21 boats had capsized. So the whole regatta was won on who got the boat up. I ended up third. A guy from Seattle, Craig Thomas, I think.
Yeah.
He ended up winning that. He was real good.
Expert. Well, speaking of capsize, to me, it all comes back to American Magic's capsize. At that point, they were right in the game and had it looked like a fast enough boat, and were getting things figured out to be very competitive, I think. And then you just can't take that that time out of your development and use it to fix your boat and expect it to be at the same place, you know.
Well, it's going to be interesting now to see, as we talked about a few weeks ago, you know, how is New Zealand going to come out having not sailed against anybody for quite a while here? Are they going to figure out ways to push themselves hard in these unusual situations so that they know what to do and how to get out of them? And that's going to be the challenge. You know, as Spithill said in his interview the other day, that maybe this is actually a really good thing for them to be put under pressure. And you know, we're going to find out. That's the benefit of being the challenger for the past how many years has been. There's more challengers, and therefore you get to you know, press each other, and somebody's going to come out really strong on top.
I was reading on the internet all over the place. Hey, is American Magic going to go help Team New Zealand now? The answer is no way.
Yeah,
you know, they got an obligation to challengers. You know, the challengers doesn't help the defender here.
Yeah.
It's a brutal format after only 4 races to be out. I mean, I would sort of question what's the point of that? Why not have this be a 9-race series as well?
Absolutely.
You know,
or first to win 7. I mean, it's 2 races a day. So, you know, the thing's over in 4 or 5 days, even if you string it out with a, you know, lay day in the middle. I agree with you, Jonathan. It was way too short. 48 hours, 36 hours. The whole thing's over.
Maybe that plays in the Kiwi, you know, Team New Zealand having a part in the schedule and stuff. That plays in them. They figure, okay, that's less practice for the challengers because you know, on Luna Rossa, they got 4 more races. Ben hasn't sailed any more races, you know, and best of 11 coming up, but that could be over in 6.
13. Is it first to win 7?
Right.
13.
Yeah, I think you know, as you know, Spithill is one of the masters of spin, and but I you know, Ed, you could certainly you've been at these high level campaigns that there's got to be something to being like they definitely feel that they were wronged with Ineos, and let's just sort of reset the commitment in the team and just go out, win some races, and kind of get you on going down the right sort of mental path, right? Versus
Yeah, I mean, okay, they feel like in one situation at one, critical moment that they, were upset that a call didn't go their way. But you'd have to say, imagine if the call went their way. Then what would the Monday morning quarterbacking have been like? Oh, they were crossing. How did they hunted?
I think there's a lot of gamesmanship in that.
Oh yeah, I mean, and the reality is they got
too much attention.
But the reality is they got spanked in the other races. So let's just see where this takes it. I think it'll be an exciting, final. Hopefully it will be. And let's find out if that was a fluke on NES parts or if they really did make themselves into a top level challenger, in that period between the Christmas Cup and the racing.
Well, certainly Spit Hill and Ainsley know each other pretty well because they were together on the big comeback in 2013. So that'll add to it. Ainsley will know about Spit Hill's PR prowess.
Yeah,
sure.
as we just saw.
Question is with American Magic, what's their future? Obviously they built a fantastic team that could go on and do anything in sailing, including another America's Cup. Will they stay together? Is this an ongoing enterprise or is this the end?
I'll speculate, but I mean, I don't know anything, but here's my speculation. Roger Penske won't do it again. He's in his 80s and got other priorities with the Indy 500 and his car racing. And Hap isn't so young, mid 70s. So I think those two aren't back. And Dean Barker seems to me that he's probably stretched it out as long as he can. And Terry Hutchinson, probably the same thing. So, they were a mercenary group that put together and went to New York and said, can we challenge on your behalf? This was not a New York Yacht Club generated event. And New York's now been in the game 4 times. Ed, you were part of one of those, but 87, 2000, 03, and this time around. And all 4 of them didn't work out. So I don't know if they're going to have a lot of stomach to come back. And then Ainsley and Grant Dalton, are they making a deal? One's to challenge your record for the other? I hear that rumor, which means foiling boats again.
Yes.
That quieted everybody down.
Yeah. So I imagine a lot of that is dictated by, the continuation of this class, or having to reboot with an entire new class would be a hard thing to stomach for some people, right, Ed?
Yeah, well, we've had 7 different classes since 1987.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the really sad things about our campaign for the 2010 event, was just building these massive giant multi-hulls at huge expense that we're never going to do anything after that ever. And, you really hope. And one of the great things about the 12 meters is that look at them, they're still out there sailing. Not that we want the America's Cup to be sailed in 12 meters now, but they were a boat that could carry on and have some value in the future, which they still do. And a lot of the IACC boats are out there, doing corporate racing and hospitality stuff. And, they are usable. I don't know that these boats are something that, and that makes it really hard for people to come in from the outside and say, oh yeah, let's get some of those things. And so, for me, what I'm hoping is that whoever, carries this forward, puts a pretty big priority on what's good for the sport and not just coming up with the coolest, possible boat. There's a lot of things that could be, really push the sport forward and get people excited to have more teams. How do we have more participation? 4 is not enough.
Yeah, that seemed to be the general sentiment of my Frostbite fleet yesterday was that, again, we're sort of still talking about, the Ineos Lunar Race and the 9 lead changes and things like that. And I think as we said before, I think we're the sailors are numb to the speed and now so are we. And we're still excited by the good racing. And, maybe as much as I love the foiling, maybe it is time to bring the boats back down to the water and keep the closing race, but keep the race course nice and confined. I think we have the technology, right, to create the boundaries and keep the race course small and force maneuvers and, make it good, busy racing.
Well, Dave, I'll just throw a scenario out there for everybody to react to. So it has to be a development boat, not one design, because that's the history of the America's Cup. It should be big so we can see the thing 80 or 90 feet. It needs to be a boat in the water, which fosters more match racing. I mean, 3 or 4 tacks is nice, but I'd like to see 20 tacks on a windward leg. You got to have national crews. I've been beating that drum for a long time. And even if you lose, you have residual value with people from your country that can continue on, bringing in mercenaries. What's the residual? So national crews. So, and I'd probably have less computers and electronics and have the sailor make a difference a little bit more. So I'll throw that out for comment.
I'm going to take a step way, way back. It's a sad but true fact that this crazy event that we call the America's Cup, and we sailors and the Frostbite fleet and everybody loves, because it is sailing. It is our sport in this rather extreme form. It's governed by a document that was written in the days when they settled arguments with duels, and they were gentlemen or gentlewomen, and one chose the weapon, the other chose how many steps to step back, and they asked Mother May I before they pulled the trigger. The America's Cup is this idiosyncratic thing that is not the Olympics. It's not Formula One. It's not, it's this out of control event that happens to be the longest running sporting event internationally that on the planet. So albeit all these problems that we sailors think could be better about it, it really is pretty amazing. And in its own way, it's the most successful sporting event. And until, somebody comes around, as we've all learned, those of us that have played this game, it'll come down to a deal struck by the challenger and the defender, whoever they may be, as to how it goes forward. And I'm a laissez-fairist. Sit back, relax. It's not the only game in town.
That's true.
Jonathan can still sail his arrow. I can go out and high-whack it.
Well, I'd like Ed's point. I want to see more competitors out there, more boats on the water. 3 challengers and 1 defender seems a little slim.
All right. Well, we're probably getting ahead of ourselves because we're not even at the cup yet, right? We're sort of at.
Oh, that's coming.
we may have different opinions come March, but so real quick. So then, I mean, what do you guys think of what is the next play for American Magic then in Auckland? Do they stick around and kind of go out sailing and happen to be in the same stretch of water with another challenger, or do they just really button the whole thing up and pack the containers and
they button up and send it home? It's an expensive payroll, $1.5 million a month at least, and they're packing up now. I mean, some of them will stay around to watch the race, I'm sure, but they're not sailing anymore.
Yeah, I agree with Gary. You got to shut it down for the cost side of things, but I don't think anybody wants to leave New Zealand. They're down there in summertime. There's no masks, there's no social distancing, there's no shut down businesses, and the America's Cup's going on. So okay, you didn't make it in, but you can still be part of all the activity that's happening.
Yeah, I'd stick around. And if Commodore Loss is down there with his big gunboat, you could go jump on board there. Which I did notice he was anchored on the starboard side. I remember at one point Terry said "big righty" on the catamaran, and so I thought, boy, look at that big American flag hanging off the back of the boat. Is that a little telltale on the side there? Maybe, I don't know.
Well, if it's a telltale, it's a telltale for both boats. So.
Cool. Well, all right. Well, what else has happened in the world, real quick? Not much here in Newport. It was cold, light day. 1 race, Frostbite day. The remote control guys were their boats were covered in ice. Sheets are freezing inside the boat. It's not happening up here right now.
Well, there was an interesting around the world race that finished with 8 competitors within 24 hours of each other or something. That was sort of interesting.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Very interesting. Yeah, there's been worldwide, there's been huge interest in the IMOCA class and in the Vendée Globe race in particular. That the media numbers are just off the charts. So the world really paid attention to this race, partly because of all the great stories within it and the human stories, and partly because it stayed an incredibly competitive race. As Ed said, right up to this final jibes to the finish, and with a margin of 2.5 hours between first and second, after applying, a retroactive penalty time. But it's such a great collection of people too. Like every one of those top people has a really interesting backstory that we don't have time to go into now, but I think that's partly what makes the sport captivating is everyone, I guess in order to do a crazy thing like sail around the world by yourself on a boat like that, you need to have something within you that sort of makes you different from the rest of us.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Well, and as we talked about, last week, unfortunately, the crowded conditions in the bay in there as they came towards the finish took the toll at least of one competitor, and hopefully didn't do too much damage to the fishing boat that he ran into.
You called it, Ed.
Well, I've nothing to do with calling it. It's pretty straightforward. There's too many boats in that place to be, zooming around at night. It's busy. So it's a tough situation. And I know people, there's folks that are jumping on the fact that, well, there's one guy on this boat and he's not having a lookout all the time if he has to take a nap and stuff. And that's tough. That's something that the race has to consider. But
that was a failure of seamanship to some degree, though. I mean, in that situation, he has the tools to prevent that, even at night. And so I'm sure he would say the same thing, candidly, and that's part of what it is. Like, how do you maintain that level of seamanship after sailing for 80 days,
And all these guys talk about, they take 20 and 30-minute naps 4 times a day for 80 days. How do you survive? How does your brain work at the end of all that? And then you come into a hectic finish in a close match. It's just beyond what I can imagine.
And similar things have happened in the ocean race as well, coming into these crowded ports where there's a lot of fishing boats outside. Remember what happened coming into Hong Kong, was it?
Yeah.
It reminded me of that old saying that you tend to get in accidents, 2 miles from your house or something like that. And that was it,
I think that's for a different reason, though. That's because you spend too much time 2 miles from your house, right? So.
Right.
It was kind of cruel, though, in this case, because who it happened to, Boris Herman, was sailing like a really competitive and very smart and good race. He was basically just tracking right behind Dowen for the last 1,500 miles, and slowly, because he had both foils, was slowly creeping up to him. And he had this time allowance of 6 hours in his pocket. So he had basically done the work to get in the position to win the race.
Yeah.
And
he was 3 hours from the finish, right?
Yeah. Think of how, just imagine what's in his head right now. Talk about the disappointment.
Yeah. It's sort of a weekend of disappointment for some major teams. I think that's sort of the general theme. And I was watching the live stream, and I think it was Dee Kafari and one of the other commentators was, as they were kind of rambling on, and they started talking about, the dangers of finishing. And I kid you not, then the sort of the alert came up that he had hit a fishing boat. And I was like, good God, you cannot,
Yeah. Well, we don't wish that on anybody for sure. That's awful stuff. And we know how scary it is out there at night. And it's bad enough to run into fishing nets, but you really don't want to bang into another boat. That's tough.
The guy that won, though, you remember he had a lead of 450 miles after Cape Horn and just got way ahead going up the Brazilian coast. And remember, there was that big, what we were talking about 3 weeks ago on this call, was how crazy the weather was. And basically the whole fleet did a restart off of the Brazilian coast. And it was a restart of the race.
Yeah.
So he went from 450 miles ahead to back even again, and then to slowly, to end up still winning the race. What a great victory for him.
Yeah. So we'll see. So real quick, do you think we'll see most of these guys back for then this summer's Fastnet? And, what happens with this fleet? We've got a lot of time to kill. They're sort of shape shifting on the skippers and sort of what happens for those top 3 boats. Do you have a sense, Jonathan?
I don't know about the team's individual plans, but the Mocha class has a pretty good schedule where they do 3 or 4 big events each year, even on the non-Vendée years. And the other big event every 2 years is the Route to Rome, which is a single-handed transatlantic race. But yeah, I think there's going to be increasing interest in the class. There's going to be more new builds, and it's a going concern right now.
Big time. All right, Eisler, what's happening in San Diego? Let's have a quick West Coast check in. The rain.
Yeah, we're talking about seamanship and fast boats hitting into things. Let me share my screen, Dave. Can you give me that?
I think you've got full privilege.
All right. You got it there?
I do.
You're looking at their track of Pyewacket, a turbocharged Volvo 70 in the Sugarloaf Rock Race, which happened on Saturday. And it was downwind and upwind, so you can see the tacks and jobs going down. We rounded to port. So let's just zoom in to Sugarloaf Rock. Right? This is the best chart you can get in CMAP world. And there we are, rounding the rock. How'd we do?
Nice. Back corner, nice.
We draw 18.
Stop in for a cold one.
We draw 18 feet. And you want to be careful because the goal is to win the Transpac and not the Sugarloaf Rock Race. But it goes to show that, there are certain seamanship things like navigation, and we're lucky it was daytime when we were doing it. We were coming in at, 15, 18 knots. If it had been nighttime, we would have had a real challenge going around that thing. Obviously, we did some homework and had a couple other charts too, but that sort of thing, it's not, the faster these boats go, the more we all have to pay good attention because the costs are just that much bigger than when we were going 4 knots.
And it's amazing to see that because, we can go for a bike ride or go for a run in our neighborhood. And when you get back, the track off your watch has which side of the street you were on, and yet here we are with rocks and little islands out in the middle of the ocean that aren't accurately set up.
Keep away from the rocks.
Yeah.
We're glad to see you didn't brick it up, Eisler, and keep the campaign going. Next time, let's see some onboard footage. We're going to get you a camera and see what it's like on board this new turbo.
Yeah, well, we all had to wear I'm not wearing my mask. We all had to wear our masks the entire race according to the race rules. But every time a boat went past us, they all took pictures of us. So we always said, put your mask on.
All right. Well, we'll probably run up to our time here. So thanks to everybody. No racing, I guess, for another cup. No cup racing, I guess, for another couple of weeks. So we'll leave that topic alone for a while. We'll hopefully check in with some of those guys before now and then with some further insight. But thanks for joining.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great week, everyone.
See you guys.
See you.
Stay safe. Time to go shovel over here. All right. Have a good one.